And Kennedy set out to get revenge and generated a very heightened, I think the only way to put it is a war of terror against Cuba. The CIA, using Cuban exiles and CIA officials, launched attacks against the Cuban coast with speedboats using machine guns and cannons. They landed small parties to get into Cuba, infiltrate, to blow up factories, sugar mills, try to get the oil refinery, and kill Cuban militia people, and they even killed a young teacher. So they were waging a war of terror, and it was a very hard war, by the way, to defend against. So Cuba's losses began to mount to the point, and I'll tell you a story that's been little written of, but it's true, in Cuban-U.S. relations. Fidel essentially decided that Cuba couldn't really continue to take these losses. And he dispatched a very loyal lieutenant named Ernesto Che Guevara to go to Uruguay at an OAS meeting to meet with Kennedy's representative, Richard Goodwin, and to offer him an entente plan. Goodwin and Che Guevara met in secret for several hours in an apartment in Uruguay. And Goodwin has written a memo of this, and it's declassified so anybody can look it up and see it. At the meeting, Che Guevara said, look, we are willing to negotiate a few things, one of which is we can loosen and weaken our military relations with the Soviet Union. 2, we can stop essentially exporting revolution to the rest of Latin America. And 3, we can work out a compensation plan to pay back the American companies which we've expropriated. And Goodwin said, those sound fine, what would you like in return? And Che said, basically a modus vivendi, that you stop attacking us, leave us alone. Well, Goodwin returned with this plan to Washington and reported to President Kennedy. And Kennedy said, so Goodwin, what do you think? Well, actually, Che had given Goodwin a box of cigars, which were Kennedy's favorites, Upmann number 1. And Kennedy had lit one up and said, you know, Goodwin, actually, you should have smoked the first one. Because there was one of the plans to kill Castro had been poisoned cigar. Anyway, he said, so Goodwin, what do you think? And Goodwin says, well, I think their offer shows weakness. I think we should turn up the heat. Those were Goodwin's words. And Kennedy agreed with his advisor, and instead of coming to terms with Cuba, after Cuba had made an offer, they turned up the heat. And the war on terror, the war of terror, escalated so that the attacks mounted. And shortly thereafter, in September, 1 month later, Fidel Castro gave the green light to the Soviet Union to place nuclear missiles on the island as the only way to defend the island against what he thought was an almost certain U.S. invasion.